Iran has invested considerable resources in its ballistic missile forces over the past 40 years. For the same reason China and North Korea, military aviation is an expensive proposition, and developing and maintaining an air force to rival the United States is very expensive indeed. Ballistic missiles offer a relatively inexpensive way to launch conventional, chemical, biological, and even nuclear payloads long distances. As an added bonus, intercepting such missiles is complex and itself an expensive undertaking. All three countries developed large ballistic missile arsenals of varying sophistication, occasionally trading in illicit information among themselves and others. Iran has a large and varied ballistic missile arsenal. It is difficult to pin down with certainty Iran's capabilities, as information inside the country is tightly controlled and the government often exaggerates or is evasive regarding its military capabilities. In 2011, Iran announced it too had already developed an anti-ship ballistic missile. Tehran is infamous for habitually exaggerating or fabricating claims about its military technology, but in 2013 footage of an apparently successful missile test was released, and by 2014 U.S. intelligence briefings confirmed the missile's deployment. The missile, which has the rather on-the-nose name Khalifars Persian Gulf, is derivative of Iran's domestically developed Fateh-110 short-ranged ballistic missile. The truck-borne Fateh-110 series can be fired on short notice because it uses solid fuel. By contrast, liquid fuel rockets require days to gas up. The Persian Gulf missile ostensibly uses an electro-optical/infrared seeker to allow it to slam its 1,433-pound warhead home into a moving naval target, though this isn't absolutely confirmed because Iran covered the seeker in photos. An Iranian article claims that in a 2013 test, the missile struck a moving naval target with 8 meters of accuracy. A 2014 CSIS assessment concludes that the rocket on average will fall within a few dozen meters of the target, and that the Khalifars has likely entered service with operational IRGC-N units. However, the Khalifars has 1/4 the DF-21's range at 190 to 220 miles, and relatedly doesn't fly as high or fast, with a lower maximum speed of Mach 3 as it plunges towards its target. Thus the Khalifars would likely prove easier to intercept with defensive missiles. Like Chinese ASBMs, the Khalifars would also require external reconnaissance assets to provide initial target cueing for its inertial guidance system. GPS guidance may also be installed in some variants. As U.S. surface warships can cruise at a brisk 30 knots 35 miles per hour, making sure the carrier remains within the target box of the missile, which can only make limited though precise course adjustments during its EO-guided descent, would prove a challenge. The ships in the carrier task force would likely detect the launch of the Persian Gulf missile and respond with evasive maneuvers to exit the target box. Thus, multiple missiles might be required to box in the target. However, the Khalifars' limitations are significantly mitigated by the fact that the Persian Gulf is quite narrow, only 35 miles across at the Straits of Hormuz, to a maximum of 220 miles. Thus, massing the mobile launchers within strike range may not prove as difficult as would ordinarily be the case. As the missile achieves a peak speed of 38 miles per minute, the early warning time might also be limited compared to a longer range but harder to intercept missile. Likewise, it would be easier to locate and cue targeting data for a ship in the Persian Gulf than the open vastness of the Pacific Ocean. The Iranian Navy and IRGC Navy operate a wide variety of surveillance assets ranging from motorboats, semi-submersible craft, and US-built CH-53 and SH-3 helicopters to drones, bizarre Baver-2 ground effect vehicles and ground-based search radars. In 2014, Iran also unveiled a faster Mach 4, anti-radiation variant of the Khalifars called the Hormuz 1 and 2, designed to home in on land and sea-based radars respectively, possibly the world's first anti-radiation ballistic missiles. An anti-radiation missile turns a warship's greatest defensive advantage, its powerful radars, into a vulnerability by homing in on it for guidance. A ship can deactivate its radar to break the lock, but then leave itself exposed to other threats. The Hormuz missiles share with the new longer-range Zulfiqar variant of the Fateh-110 a new Mobile 2 rail launcher. This could help an anti-ship missile battery launch more missiles in a short time frame, oversaturating defenses. Furthermore, experience in the 1991 Gulf War suggests that truck-mounted ballistic missiles can be surprisingly difficult to hunt down even when benefiting from air superiority. In August 2018, Iran announced development of a Fateh Mobin Bright Conqueror variant of Fateh 110 with an infrared seeker for terminal guidance, and claimed radar evasive features, though such features were not evident to visual inspection. The Mobin seeker apparently gives it anti-ship as well as ground attack capabilities. 2 months later in October 2018, the IRGC Aerospace Forces Commander General Amir Ali Hajizadeh claimed in a speech that Iran had developed a new guided ASBM with 700 km 434 miles strike range, expanding potential targeting across the Gulf of Oman. No name was specified, though Iran's newer Zulfiqar SRBM and improved Fateh 110 has the same range, so it's possible he was referring to an anti-ship Zulfiqar variant. U.S. surface warships nonetheless benefit from formidable multi-layered Aegis air defense systems, some components of which are designed to tackle more challenging missile threats than the Qamafars. Furthermore, U.S. carriers always deploy as part of mutually supporting task forces. However, the IRGC's short-range ASBMs are situated in a confined theater, the Persian Gulf, in which they would have plentiful opportunities to detect and attack vessels. Furthermore, the ASBMs attack from a different vector than the far more common sea-skimming anti-ship cruise missiles also deployed in the region. A saturation attack by many missiles at once, launched from different angles, and including multiple types of weapons, could potentially overwhelm defenses to deadly effect. Perhaps just as important as having ballistic missiles is the kill chain of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance ISR assets required to keep constant tabs on a U.S. Navy battle group, allowing Iran's missileers to launch their missiles with the most current targeting information available. U.S. Navy aircraft carriers and their escorts can steam at speeds of up to 35 knots, making information even just an hour old useless for targeting purposes. Experts reckon that China will have a similar requirement for a persistent ISR across the vastness of the Pacific, but Iran will have a considerably easier task. The Islamic Republic's southern borders run the length of the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, a coastline longer than that of California, Oregon, and Washington combined, and both are less than 300 miles wide at their widest. Even a country like Iran, lacking sophisticated reconnaissance assets, would find it easy to keep track of something as large as a carrier battle group. Military assets including outdated military aircraft and helicopters, the many small boats and ships of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, Iranian intelligence agents, and regime-friendly civilian vessels could keep track of a fleet of U.S. ships relatively easily. Iran would likely want to pull an American carrier battle group as close to the Iran coastline as possible. This would allow the country to disperse its fleet of ballistic missiles across a wider area and farther inland, giving them a better chance of escaping detection before launch. U.S. reconnaissance assets such as JSTRS, the RQ-4 Global Hawk, and others can peer into Iran without entering Iranian territory, making detection of missile movements possible without entering Iranian airspace. As Iranian missiles gain in range and sophistication, such missiles could be deployed deeper within the country's interior where they are more difficult to detect. It is worth keeping in mind Iran is a large country of approximately 636,000 square miles, making it larger than California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, and Utah combined. In the event of an attack, Iran would likely launch every missile it could possibly throw at a carrier strike group, ideally scores or even hundreds of missiles. Even missiles that have no reasonable chance of striking a moving warship, the vast majority of the missile force, would be launched in order to overwhelm the carrier's defenders with threats. Iran, which pioneered the use of small boats armed with rocket-propelled grenades, heavy machine guns, and artillery rockets during the Iran-Iraq War, has long been a fan of overwhelming enemy forces with obsolete or ineffective weapons to conserve combat power. A missile attack would likely be no different. An alert carrier battle group's defenses, directed by a guided missile cruiser armed with the Aegis combat system, would likely take out most of the incoming missiles. Shorter-range ballistic missiles launched from the coastline would be engaged with SM-6 air defense missiles, and the more common standard SM-2 Block 4 has a limited anti-ballistic capability. It might be necessary to use SM-3 ballistic missile interceptors against longer-range Iranian missiles. Most Iranian missiles would miss, having never had a reasonable chance of hitting, contributing best as a means of confusing the enemy. Could a lucky Iranian missile actually sink an American carrier? It's unlikely. The missiles with the best chances of hitting, short-range missiles with terminal guidance like the Fateh-Moban, have the smallest warheads and move at the slowest speeds. Such a missile would have to carry a nuclear warhead to pose a mortal threat to a 100,000-ton warship, and Iran lacks the fissile material and expertise to build such a warhead. A smaller target, such as a destroyer, would be more vulnerable but also more difficult to hit. Even under ideal circumstances, Iran's missile arsenal is unlikely to pose a credible threat against the U.S. Navy. That having been said, Iran can be expected to continue to develop longer-range missiles with greater throw weights and improved accuracy. The time may come when the Pentagon, out of an abundance of caution, might decline to send carriers beyond the Gulf of Oman, but that time is not now.